Across decades of reported encounters, something unusual emerges. Not a single story, but a pattern. People who have never met, living in different countries, speaking different languages, from entirely different walks of life, describe seeing the same kind of being. Their accounts are separated by years, sometimes generations. Yet when placed side by side, the details align with unsettling precision. These aren't scientists comparing notes or storytellers collaborating on fiction. Many witnesses report their experiences reluctantly, often years after the fact, sometimes only under hypnosis or intense emotional distress. Some claim they tried to forget entirely, and yet, when they finally speak, the descriptions echo one another. Small figures, thin bodies, oversized heads, vast black eyes. Reports of these beings appear more frequently from the mid-20th century onward, particularly after the 1940s and 50s, coinciding with a rise in UFO sightings. Across decades of reported encounters, something unusual emerges. Not a single story, but a pattern. But traces of similar entities can be found much earlier, hinted at in folklore, ancient myths, and whispered accounts of strange visitors that came in the night, paralyzed the body, and vanished without leaving clear evidence. What makes these stories difficult to dismiss is their consistency. Witnesses describe not only how the beings look, but how they move, how the air feels around them, how encounters unfold with clinical precision. They speak of the same sensations: paralysis, levitation, bright light, humming sounds, missing time. Even the emotional tone is similar: fear mixed with calm, panic subdued by overwhelming control. Over time, these repeated elements have formed what researchers now call the gray archetype, an image so familiar it's embedded in popular culture, yet its origins trace back not to movies or television, but to individual people recounting deeply personal, often traumatic experiences. Skeptics argue these similarities result from suggestion, cultural contamination, or the mind filling gaps during stress. But traces of similar entities can be found much earlier, hinted at in folklore, ancient myths, and whispered accounts of strange visitors that came in the night, paralyzed the body, and vanished without leaving clear evidence. Believers counter that patterns don't form without a source, that repetition across time and geography suggests something external, something encountered rather than imagined. The question remains: how do so many people, unknown to one another, describe the same beings in the same way? And if these encounters aren't isolated hallucinations or misremembered dreams, then what exactly have these people been seeing, watching them silently from the dark, standing at the edge of the bed, or waiting under blinding white light? This is where the story begins. For many witnesses, the first encounter with a gray isn't defined by movement or action, but by sudden presence. Again and again, people describe the same moment: an abrupt awareness that something is there, not a gradual realization, but an instant shift, as if the room itself has changed. The air feels heavier, sound seems muted, and standing nearby is a figure that doesn't belong. One of the earliest and most influential modern accounts came from Betty and Barney Hill in 1961. Under hypnosis, both independently described small, humanoid figures with thin bodies, long arms, and oversized heads. Barney fixated on the eyes, large, slanted, dominating the face, and recalled overwhelming fear when he realized the beings were watching him deliberately, not passively. The figures weren't described as monstrous or violent, but unnervingly controlled, as if they knew exactly what was happening while he did not. Throughout the 1960s and 70s, similar descriptions began appearing from unrelated witnesses. People consistently reported beings around 3 to 4 feet tall, with narrow shoulders, elongated limbs, and a slight, fragile-looking build. Despite their small size, many witnesses emphasized the beings didn't feel weak or childlike. Instead, They carried a presence that felt authoritative and deliberate, as if size had no connection to power. In some cases, witnesses reported encountering taller versions, 5 to 7 feet in height, particularly during structured examinations. These taller figures often stood apart, observing silently, while smaller ones moved with purpose around the witness. The contrast reinforced the impression that these weren't random entities, but members of a system with defined roles. One of the most commonly reported emotional reactions during first contact is paralyzing fear, quickly followed by something stranger, calm. Many witnesses say the terror fades unnaturally fast, replaced by emotional neutrality or resignation, as if their fear has been suppressed or overridden. In encounters reported by Travis Walton in 1975, the beings were described as thin, pale figures with large heads and dark eyes, moving silently and deliberately. Walton later recalled intense fear upon first seeing them, not because they attacked, but because they felt emotionless, indifferent to his panic, as if he were an object being handled rather than a person being confronted. Across accounts, witnesses struggle to articulate why the beings feel so unsettling. Many say it's not their appearance alone, but their lack of expressive movement. They don't gesture, fidget, or react the way humans do. They simply stand, watch, and then act, smoothly, efficiently, without hesitation. This stillness creates the impression of intelligence operating behind a mask. The first impression, then, is rarely one of chaos or aggression. Instead, it's one of controlled intrusion. The beings are small, thin, and quiet, yet they dominate the space effortlessly. Witnesses often report feeling reduced, managed, or outmatched, not physically, but psychologically. And it's in that moment, standing face to face with something clearly alive, clearly intelligent, and clearly not human, that many witnesses realize the encounter is not a dream. It is happening. When witnesses describe the face of a gray, they almost always begin with the eyes. They dominate the entire expression, vast, black, almond-shaped, and unnervingly still. Set deep into a smooth, oversized head, the eyes appear to wrap slightly around the sides, giving the impression the being can see far more than what lies directly ahead. There are no visible whites, no pupils, no blinking in the human sense, just a seamless, reflective black surface. Many abductees say the eyes feel active, not merely observant. They describe sensations of thoughts, emotions, or intentions being conveyed through eye contact alone, as if the eyes themselves are the primary interface for communication. Fear, calm, curiosity. These impressions are said to arrive instantly, without words, and without any visible change in the being's facial features. In some accounts, witnesses report that this black surface isn't the true eye itself, but a thin, dark, lens-like film, similar to a contact lens, covering the eye entirely. According to these reports, when the film is removed or retracted, it reveals a very different appearance beneath. A more human-like eye with a visible iris, often described as blue. This revelation is sometimes remembered as shocking because it contrasts so sharply with the iconic black-eyed image associated with the Greys. The black film is frequently interpreted by witnesses as protective in nature, shielding the eyes from bright lights, both on craft and in Earth's environment. Some abductees speculate it functions like a biological visor, reducing glare or filtering harsh illumination, much like sunglasses or a welding mask would for humans. This detail has led many to believe the familiar black-eyed appearance may be adaptive or technological, rather than the being's natural state. The rest of the face appears almost unfinished by human standards. The mouth is usually described as a small slit or thin line that barely moves, if at all. The nose is reduced to two small nostril openings without a bridge, and external ears are absent, leaving only faint indentations or small openings where ears might be expected. There are no eyebrows, eyelashes, or facial hair, nothing that signals emotion in the way humans instinctively recognize. Taken together, the face of the gray is often described as deeply unsettling, not because it appears aggressive, but because it appears functionally minimal, as if every feature exists only for a specific purpose. The eyes, above all else, feel less like organs of sight and more like instruments, tools for perception, communication, and control, silently watching, silently speaking, and revealing almost nothing in return. When witnesses describe touching a gray or being touched by one, the memory often lingers with unsettling clarity. More than the sight of the beings, it's the feel that many struggle to forget. Again and again, people describe skin that looks organic yet doesn't behave like human skin at all. Their skin is smooth, hairless, and uniform, often described as rubbery, synthetic, or almost plastic-like. The color most often ranges from light to medium gray, though some accounts mention beige, bluish-gray, or slightly greenish tones. To the touch, witnesses say the skin can feel cool and slightly clammy, like soft rubber or a damp latex glove. Betty Hill, under hypnosis, recalled being allowed to touch one of the beings during her 1961 encounter. She described the skin as smooth and strangely resilient, not soft like human flesh, but firm and almost elastic, as if stretched tightly over the body. There was no body hair, no variation in texture, and no warmth in the way one would expect from a living organism. What disturbed her most was how uniform it felt, as though it lacked the subtle imperfections that define human skin. In the Travis Walton case, Walton reported being physically handled and restrained by thin, humanoid beings aboard a craft. He later described their skin as pale and smooth, with a cool temperature that immediately registered as wrong. He recalled the sensation as vaguely rubbery, not slimy, not dry, but something in between, as if the surface resisted the natural warmth of his own body. The contact felt clinical and impersonal, intensifying his sense of being treated as an object rather than a person. Author Whitley Strieber, who has written extensively about his own alleged encounters, described touching the being's skin as feeling almost synthetic, comparable to soft rubber or polished plastic. He emphasized the absence of pores, wrinkles, or muscular definition beneath the surface, as if the skin were a single, continuous layer rather than a living, responsive organ. Strieber noted that this texture gave him the disturbing impression that the beings were manufactured rather than evolved. Other abductees report similar tactile impressions when the Greys place their hands on the body. The touch is frequently described as cool or slightly cold, with a firmness that doesn't change in response to pressure. There's no tightening of muscles, no warmth increasing with contact, just steady, unyielding control. In several accounts, contact with the skin is accompanied by a mild tingling or numbing sensation, especially during examinations. Witnesses are often unsure whether this effect comes from the beings themselves or from some form of technology they're using. Either way, the result is the same. The body feels subdued, compliant, and strangely detached from sensation. What stands out most across these testimonies is the lack of biological familiarity. Human skin communicates emotion, effort, and vulnerability through temperature, moisture, and subtle movement. The Grey's skin, by contrast, is often described as emotionally blank, revealing nothing about exertion, age, or health. It doesn't sweat, it doesn't flush, it doesn't react. For many witnesses, this is where the unease deepens. Because whatever these beings are, their skin feels less like the surface of a living creature and more like the outer layer of something designed. When witnesses recall physical contact with the Greys, It's often the hands they remember most clearly. The arms are described as unusually long and thin, sometimes extending nearly to the knees with little visible musculature. They don't flex or tense in the way human arms do. Instead, they move with controlled precision, smooth, deliberate, and efficient, as if guided by internal calibration rather than instinct. The hands themselves are almost universally described as elongated and delicate, usually with 3 or 4 fingers. These fingers are thin, jointed differently than human fingers, and often lack visible fingernails. Some witnesses describe small pads or rounded tips at the ends, while others report suction-like textures that seem designed for grip rather than manipulation. Betty Hill recalled being guided by the arm and shoulder during her encounter. She described the hand that touched her as cool and firm, closing around her arm with just enough pressure to direct movement, never squeezing, never hesitating. What unsettled her wasn't the strength of the grip, but its certainty, as though resistance had already been accounted for. Travis Walton reported being restrained by multiple beings at once. He described their hands as light in weight, but surprisingly effective, capable of holding him down despite their thin appearance. He recalled a sensation of numbness spreading from the points of contact, making struggle feel pointless, as though his own nervous system was being bypassed. Whitley Strieber described moments where a Gray's hand rested on his body during examinations. He emphasized how the fingers didn't adjust or reposition instinctively, as a human hand would. Instead, they remained fixed, applying steady, unwavering pressure. To him, the touch felt less like a living grasp and more like being positioned by an instrument, functional, impersonal, and exact. Across many accounts, the limbs appear stronger than they should be. Witnesses often comment on the striking visual disparity of the Greys. Their arms appear almost too thin to possess any real strength, yet they can effortlessly lift and control adult humans with ease. This puzzling contrast between appearance and ability hints at a different kind of physical reality, one that suggests they might operate under unique constraints, or perhaps even harness unseen forces. Another intriguing aspect is their remarkable coordination. When several Greys are present, their movements seem synchronized, almost like a carefully choreographed dance. One might grip a limb, while another positions a body, and a third handles an invisible instrument, all without uttering a single word. This eerie precision leaves witnesses feeling that these beings communicate through an internal, unified system. Many also report experiencing a tingling or numbing sensation where the Greys make contact. This feeling often radiates strongest from the wrists, shoulders, neck, or temples, amplifying the unsettling atmosphere of their presence. Some believe the sensation is caused by the beings themselves. Others suspect it comes from technology integrated into their hands or gloves. Regardless of the cause, the result is consistent. Resistance fades, and the body becomes compliant. Emotionally, this touch is often remembered as the moment fear transforms into helplessness. The hands don't hurt, they don't comfort, they simply act. And in their calm, methodical movements, witnesses sense something deeply alien. Not malice, not cruelty, but a level of detachment that feels far more disturbing. Because whatever is holding them doesn't hesitate, doesn't react, doesn't feel. It is simply doing what it was designed to do. Nearly every close encounter with the Greys is accompanied by a sudden and dramatic change in the environment, a shift so profound that witnesses often say it feels as though the normal rules of reality have been suspended. The first change is usually light. Witnesses describe intense illumination that seems to come from everywhere at once, yet casts no clear shadows. The light is often white, pale blue, or softly luminous, bright enough to overwhelm the senses, but strangely non-blinding. Some say it pulses gently, Others describe it as steady and diffuse, filling the room or craft with a sterile glow reminiscent of a surgical theater. In bedroom encounters, people report being awakened by this light without any visible source. No lamps, no windows, no identifiable origin. The walls, ceiling, and even the air itself appear to glow. Almost simultaneously, sound begins to change. Many witnesses report a low humming, buzzing, or vibrating tone sometimes felt more than heard. It may resemble electrical current, distant machinery, or a deep resonance that seems to pass through the body rather than enter through the ears. Some describe a rising pitch just before paralysis sets in, while others hear a rhythmic pulse, as if the environment is alive and breathing. Then comes the most terrifying effect of all: paralysis. People consistently report being fully conscious, able to see, hear, and think, yet completely unable to move. Arms feel heavy, legs unresponsive, the voice locked in the throat. Some attempt to scream or struggle, only to discover that the body simply will not obey. Unlike sleep paralysis, witnesses insist this state feels externally imposed. Many describe the paralysis arriving instantly, without warning. Often at the precise moment they become aware of the being's presence. What makes this paralysis especially disturbing is that panic doesn't escalate the way it normally would. Witnesses often describe an unnatural calm descending over them, fear still present, but muted, dulled, or overridden. Thoughts feel slowed, emotional reactions feel suppressed. Some say it feels as though their nervous system has been turned down, as if someone has adjusted an internal dial. In examination scenarios, this state allows the grays to move the body, effortlessly lifting limbs, repositioning the head, or levitating the person entirely without resistance. Several abductees report floating off beds or through walls, fully aware of what's happening, yet powerless to stop it. Time itself becomes unreliable. Many witnesses experience missing time, later discovering hours have passed when only minutes seem to elapse. Others report fragmented memory flashes of light, brief images, sounds without context, as though parts of the experience were deliberately concealed or erased. The environment often feels sterile and artificial, like a controlled space designed to minimize variables. The air may feel charged or electrically active, causing tingling sensations on the skin or hair standing on end. Some report a faint chemical or sharp, sterile odor, sometimes like ammonia or disinfectant, reinforcing the impression of a clinical setting rather than a living one. Together, these effects create a profound sense of vulnerability. The light overwhelms the senses. The sound vibrates through the body. The paralysis removes choice. Witnesses often say this is the moment they realize they're no longer participants in their own experience, only observers. Whatever is happening will continue, regardless of fear, resistance, or consent. And perhaps most unsettling of all is the precision with which these effects occur. They're not chaotic, they're not accidental. They arrive together: light, sound, stillness, as if triggered intentionally, activated the moment control is required. For many, this is when the realization sets in. This environment was not meant for humans, and control was never optional. Across many encounter narratives, a recurring pattern emerges: the presence of two distinct types of grays that seem to operate together, the smaller workers and the taller overseers. The smaller grays, usually around 3 to 4 feet tall, are most often the ones physically interacting with the abductee. In a realm beyond our understanding, there exist beings known for their remarkable efficiency. They guide, lift, and escort individuals through sterile corridors and into examination rooms. Their movements synchronized, almost as if they share a single mind or purpose. Witnesses describe them as task-driven, devoid of individual personality, evoking an image of biological technicians rather than independent entities. During examinations, the smaller grays emerge as the operators of complex instruments, meticulously positioning bodies and executing standardized procedures with clinical precision. Some abductees liken them to drones, engineered for a purely functional existence, untouched by emotion or relational intricacies. Yet, there looms a taller, more imposing figure, the taller gray. Towering 5 to 7 feet, this being stands apart, often silently observing, radiating a powerful mental presence that captivates those who encounter it. In this eerie dance of roles, the distinction between operator and overseer blurs, leaving a haunting imprint on the memories of those chosen. Across accounts, this division of roles creates the impression of a hierarchical system or specialization of function, the smaller grays as workers and examiners, and the taller grays as supervisors, coordinators, or commanders overseeing the encounter from a higher level of authority. Reports of gray communication almost never involve spoken language. There are no moving lips, no audible voices, no sound carried through the air. Instead, witnesses describe communication occurring directly inside the mind, clear, immediate, and unmistakably foreign. Abductees often say the messages arrive as fully formed words or sentences in their own native language, as if an internal voice has suddenly activated one that is fluent, precise, and clearly not their own. Others describe the transfer as concepts or ideas rather than sentences, arriving all at once, complete with meaning and emotional context. In many cases, communication goes beyond words altogether. Witnesses report receiving images, sensations, or sudden downloads of information, flashes of understanding that feel inserted rather than learned. There is no sense of conversation unfolding over time. Meaning simply appears. The first messages are often brief and functional. During initial contact, abductees commonly recall simple reassurances delivered while they're paralyzed or being moved. Do not be afraid. We won't hurt you. This will not take long. The tone is calm and neutral, offering just enough information to suppress panic without explaining what is happening. As encounters progress into examinations or procedures, communication becomes even more minimal. Instructions are short and procedural. Stay still, look here, remain calm. Explanations, if given at all, are sparse and matter of fact. The emphasis isn't on comfort or consent, but on efficiency. Some witnesses describe later phases of the encounter that feel markedly different, moments often remembered only in fragments or recovered under hypnosis. These are sometimes referred to as conference or discussion phases, where beings communicate broader ideas rather than instructions. Topics reported include genetic programs, hybrid children, environmental collapse, nuclear war, or humanity's future behavior. These exchanges feel less like dialogue and more like briefings, information delivered without invitation or opportunity for debate. Emotionally, the communication carries a distinctive tone. Witnesses consistently describe it as calm, controlled, and clinically detached, lacking the inflection, warmth, or emotional nuance of human speech. Some describe the mental voice as soft and genderless, slightly monotone, yet unmistakably intentional. Alongside the messages themselves, many witnesses report a deliberate calming influence imposed on their emotional state. Panic fades unnaturally fast. Fear feels dampened rather than resolved. Even during painful or invasive procedures, emotions seem muted, as if the nervous system has been dialed down to prevent interference. The overall effect is a briefing delivered with precision and a calm that feels imposed rather than earned. Eye contact plays a crucial role in this process. Numerous accounts describe grays speaking with their eyes. Prolonged eye contact is often followed by sudden mental effects, memories surfacing, emotions shifting, or visions appearing without warning. Witnesses frequently report feeling as though their thoughts are being examined or searched, comparing the sensation to someone rifling through mental files. Some describe this as mind reading. Others say it feels more intrusive, not just observation, but active manipulation. Thoughts stall, images are replaced. New impressions are imposed while the gray's gaze remains locked in place. In many encounters, this leads into vivid mental sequences. Witnesses describe being shown scenes of environmental destruction, war, or societal collapse, often framed as warnings rather than threats. Others report visions of other worlds, unfamiliar landscapes, or hybrid beings, sometimes accompanied by the mental assertion that these beings are connected to you or part of us and you. These sequences don't feel like conversations, they feel like lessons. Controlled presentations where the abductee can emotionally react but has no control over pacing, content, or conclusion. The information flows one way. Underlying all of this is a deeper sense of control. Many abductees report that the Greys can suppress fear, induce paralysis, guide movement, or influence behavior without physical contact. People describe being compelled to walk, turn, or lie down through mental prompting alone. Memory appears to be part of this control as well. Numerous accounts suggest that memories aren't erased, but selectively suppressed, with recall delayed until hypnosis, dreams, or later life events. This reinforces the impression that communication and control operate on the same mental level. Thoughts accessed, emotions adjusted, memories gated. Perhaps most unsettling is the lingering effect this communication leaves behind. Even after the encounter ends, witnesses often report a residual sense that their thoughts aren't entirely private, a subtle paranoia, a heightened self-awareness, or the feeling of being watched internally rather than externally. And yet, despite all of this, many witnesses emphasize one paradoxical detail: the Greys don't feel chaotic, they don't feel impulsive, they don't feel malicious, they feel intentional, focused, controlled, and utterly unconcerned with how their presence is perceived. When witnesses try to explain what they encountered, they often struggle to separate what the Greys are from what they do. Their bodies are small and fragile-looking, yet capable of effortless control. Their skin feels artificial, yet unmistakably real. Their movements are precise, their touch cold and exact, their eyes overwhelming, not because they express emotion, but because they seem to see through it. Nothing about them feels accidental. The physical form appears optimized rather than evolved. Smooth skin without distraction, elongated limbs built for reach rather than strength, oversized heads housing something far more complex than what the body suggests. The black eyes, sometimes revealed to be lenses rather than organs, feel less like windows and more like interfaces, tools for perception, protection, and control. But it is not their appearance that leaves the deepest mark. It is the loss of agency. With light that fills space without a source, sound that vibrates through the body, and paralysis that arrives instantly and without warning, witnesses are stripped of choice before they can resist. Movement stops. Speech fails. Even fear is subdued, not conquered but chemically or mentally dampened, as though emotion itself has become optional. Touch follows, calm, clinical, exact, hands restrained without strain. Limbs are positioned with certainty. The body responds as if it no longer belongs entirely to the person experiencing it. And then the mind is accessed. Communication arrives without sound, meaning without language. Thoughts appear fully formed, fluent, undeniable. Reassurance, instruction, explanation, all delivered internally, all impossible to ignore. Images replace memories. Emotions are adjusted. Resistance is anticipated before it can surface. Even memory itself proves negotiable. Hours vanish. Experiences collapse into fragments. What should be unforgettable becomes unreachable, sealed behind mental barriers that only sometimes open. In dreams, under hypnosis, or years later without warning. The forgetting feels deliberate, not broken, controlled, not chaotic. When the encounter ends, there is no farewell. The beings leave as they arrived. Quietly, efficiently, without explanation. The light fades, sound returns, movement comes back online. The room looks normal again, but the person does not. What remains is uncertainty. Not just about what happened, but about how much of it is remembered accurately and how much is still hidden. A sense that thoughts were touched, that boundaries were crossed without permission, that control extended beyond the physical and into the mind itself. For many witnesses, This is the most unsettling conclusion of all. The Greys don't need force. They don't need violence. They don't even need fear. They operate where resistance is weakest, in attention, memory, emotion, and perception. And once that boundary has been crossed, it cannot be unseen. Whether these encounters represent external beings, internal experiences, or something that exists between the two remains unresolved. Science offers no confirmation. Skepticism offers no closure. Belief offers no certainty. Only the pattern remains. A shared description, a shared loss of control, a shared silence where memory should be, and the lingering question that follows every account. If so many people remember the same beings, but cannot remember everything they did, then what exactly was meant to be forgotten?